everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Experience Maker Live Show. My name is Dan Gingiss, customer experience keynote speaker, author, podcaster, and coach. And every week I am here bringing you some experts in different fields to talk about experience. Now, normally we are here on Thursdays at noon Eastern, but we had to adjust this week because I'm going to be traveling later in the week. And so we got Monday today, and I'm pretty excited about it. We have a really cool guest coming up. First, I just want to tell you about the wonderful sponsor that we have for the program here today. They are my friends at Zoho Desk. Zoho Desk helps you manage customer conversations across multiple channels, such as email, chat, phone, social media, website. They help you respond and perform follow-up activities seamlessly. So check out zoho.com/desk and do me a favor, tell them that the Experience Maker sent you. I also wanted to tell you that I have an Amazon page that I'd love for you to check out. My Amazon page allows you to find all of my favorite books, including today's guests' books. You just go to amazon.com/shop/dgingiss. You'll find business books, customer experience, customer service books, marketing books, even non-business books, plus some fun things like my favorite board games, some home and office equipment, things that I've collected over the days and weeks and months and years on Amazon that I love sharing with others. So do me a favor, check that out and let me know if you have a product that you think should be on there as well. All right, enough talking. Let's start communicating and connecting and asking some questions of our guest today. He is the CEO of the Speaker Lab, and his name is Grant Baldwin. Welcome, sir. How are you today?
Greetings, Dan. Good to be with you, man. I appreciate you letting me hang out with you.
Hey, I am happy to have you. As I mentioned before we went on, always trust the ball guy, right? So
this is true.
We got to hang together. So it's going to be a good program, I'm sure. Grant, you are the author of The Successful Speaker: 5 Steps to Booking Gigs, Getting Paid, and Building Your Platform. Tell us a little bit about you and the book.
Yeah, so I guess if we go way back in time, in high school, I was really involved in my local church, and my youth pastor had a big impact in my life. And I was like, I want to do that. And so that was kind of the path I was on. I worked at a local church for a little while as a youth pastor, and there gave me a lot of opportunities to speak. And speaking was one of those things I really enjoyed, wanted to do more of. I just didn't know, like, how do you do this? And so at the time I was emailing a bunch of other speakers, just harassing them, stalking them, just like, hey, just tell me, how do I do this? And so eventually I figured out how to book a few gigs, and got to a point where I was speaking full time, doing about 60, 70 gigs a year. And then had a lot of people were asking me, like, hey, I want to be a speaker. How would I do that? You know, and how do you find gigs, and what do you charge, and who do you speak to? What do you speak about? Like, how does this mysterious black box of an industry work? And so we started doing some coaching and training around that. That's what's evolved into the Speaker Lab, into the Successful Speaker. And yeah, so that's the core of what we do today, is teaching people how to find and book paid speaking gigs.
That's awesome. And as a member of that industry, I agree that it does feel like a black box sometimes, which is really funny. So I really enjoyed your book and helped answer some questions for me. I thought it was super useful. So thank you for doing that. As I mentioned, I put it on my Amazon page under favorite business books. So if you're out there in the audience looking to become a speaker or growing your speaker business, I highly recommend Grant's book. So Grant, let's talk a little bit about event experience. So obviously in the last 2 years, we didn't have very many of them. They moved virtual, which was a big challenge for speakers. We're now back doing live events. I've had a really busy May, as I'm sure you have, which is fantastic. It's so great to see. I'm definitely seeing that audience members are just thrilled to be back in person. And so hopefully that is there permanently. But what do you think about when you go on stage and you're about to deliver your keynote? What do you think about in terms of the experience around you, the audience, the event planner, the facility, all that sort of stuff? What goes through your head?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think one of the best things that speakers can do is learn to become really, really good at creating an experience, especially whenever it comes to working with the event planner, because you got to think about it from their perspective. You know, when an event planner is putting on an event and they're bringing in a speaker is an important part of that, but that the speaker is one of hundreds, if not thousands, of moving pieces that go into that event. And so one of the best things that you can do is not only be really, really good on stage, but really, really, really good off stage. And that really just comes down to like being good to work with, being easy to work with, making sure that you follow through, that you do what you say you're going to do. So little things like when leading up to the event and the weeks and months leading up to it, that you're quick to respond to emails, that whenever they're looking for something from you, that you're quick to get that back to them, that they're not having to like follow up with you and chase you over and over. When you're on site at the event, one simple thing that any speaker can do is as soon as you land, as soon as you are there, is texting the event planner, letting them know that you are there, that you're in their zip code, you're in their time zone, letting them know that you're headed to the hotel or the convention center or whatever it is. As soon as you get there, making sure that you see them, that you have that face-to-face connection with them. Because you think about like they booked you probably months and months before, and then you get up to the event and it's like, are they going to show up? Are they going to be here? I don't know. And so just easing that burden off of them. Little things like, again, whenever it comes to like a sound check or some type of technical check or run through, that you show up on time, that you are punctual, that you're prepared, that you're ready. Off stage, that you are interacting with them, you're checking in to see if they need anything else from you. That if you need something, that you are self-sufficient, that you're an adult, that you can go get it for yourself, that you're not just dependent on them to find things for you. So again, all these things are like just really, really simple, basic things to do. But if you do those things well, those are the type of things that makes it an event planner want to work with you. It makes an event planner want to refer you. And again, I know it seems very, very simple, but it really does make such a huge difference for an event planner.
Yeah, for sure. I remember you saying in your book about the texting when you land, and that is something that I do. And it's interesting. I was thinking about it the other day because I had a flight from Chicago to Phoenix. It was a direct flight. The airline, about 2 hours before the flight's supposed to take off, the airline texts me and says that my flight has been delayed by 6 hours. And thankfully, I hadn't left the house yet. Yeah. So I quickly went on the app and I rearranged my flights. And instead of a direct, I did a layover and all this stuff. And I was showing up a lot later than I expected, but still with plenty of time. And I thought about texting an update to the event planner. And I thought, wait a second. This event planner has so many other things on their mind. Why the heck do I need to make them nervous that I'm having a bad flight day? Yeah. And so I didn't, and I just kind of kept silent. And then when I landed, said, you know, hey, well, I'm in Phoenix. Can't wait to see you. And so I think those kind of things are really important. You mentioned the AV check. One of the things that I've started doing is always making sure to thank the AV team. Mm-hmm. I actually have a little takeaway gift that I give them just to say thank you. I found several times that the AV team will say something to me like, you know, we do a lot of events and we'll recommend you for a future event because you were so great to work with. So yep. It reminds me of my dad always taught me, you know, in business that everybody's important. And he always taught me, you know, be super nice to the secretary or to the security guard or to, you know, the person that often just gets ignored. And that's a person that often has more power than we think and can kind of help you down the road. So it sounds like you've definitely done things similar.
Yeah, like one lesson I learned early on in my career is you have no idea who's in the audience, and you have no idea, you know, what their role is or what their connections are. So, for example, I remember one gig that I did at the time. I was living in Missouri, and I was invited to do a gig in Oklahoma. It was kind of a small little state convention. They had $500, and so at the time, $500 was $1 million to me. But $500 was basically, and like they weren't going to be able to cover any travel. So it's basically like by the time I got back down there and back, like you're kind of breaking even. But it wasn't that bad. It was a rep. It was a chance to get on stage. And so I remember I went, I spoke, and I finished up. It was a small little conference, you know, probably less than 100 people. But I remember what was interesting was right afterwards, there was a lady who came up to me and she said, hey, my husband is the national director for this organization and for this group. And you did a great job. I'm going to tell him. And sure enough, a few weeks later, he reached out and booked me for several of their national conferences. And again, like, I had no clue who she was. It wasn't introduced like, hey, here's such and such, and she's a big deal. Make sure you treat her well, you know. But again, it's just a reminder of you have no idea who's in the audience. So there've been several of those type of situations or stories where something is, you know, something's happened or someone's been in the audience and it's led to something else. And so, yeah, you have no idea who's in the audience. You have no idea who you may be interacting with. And so I love that expression from your dad to just treat everyone like they're important, treat everybody like they're a big deal. I think that absolutely goes a long way.
So I wanted to ask you, you kind of stumbled right into a question that I wanted to ask you, which is about this idea of taking on gigs, either for no fee or for much less than your typical fee. I've definitely struggled with when to do that. And, sometimes I take a leap of faith and say, well, I think it's the right audience for me. And so therefore I'm willing to go take that jump, and sometimes it pays off and sometimes it doesn't. Do you have a formula for when you choose that, especially as you've advanced in your career? And let's face it, probably don't have to take lower price or free gigs. Do you have a strategy for that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think there's kind of this misconception that doing a free gig is a bad thing. But what I would say is that it's okay to do free gigs as long as you know why you're doing it. Meaning, don't just do it out of the goodness of your heart. Like you're running a business, and so you have to treat this as a business, which is tough, especially early on for speakers, because we just like speaking, and speaking's fun. We enjoy it. We're looking for at-bats. We're looking for reps, and so it's really easy to kind of justify to anything possible of just like, yeah, of course I want to. Of course I'm willing to speak, and of course I'm willing to travel across the country. Of course I'm willing to do whatever. And so there's a couple of reasons or a couple of ways where speaking for free might make sense. One of those being just for the practice. The way that you get better as a speaker is that you speak. The way that you get better as a writer is that you write. And so the more opportunities you have to speak, the better you can become. Maybe it's for the opportunity for who's in the audience. So maybe you sell some type of book or product or service, and so you just know that your ideal client is going to be in that audience. So there's been times where I've taken a lower fee because I knew like I'm going to sell a ton of books at this, or I'm going to sell a ton of services or courses or whatever it may be. And so knowing who's in the audience may make sense. Maybe there's an event planner that you want to work with, knowing like if I get my foot in the door with this particular event planner, they're going to recommend me for other events that either they host or other people that they know. Another reason that may make sense is maybe it's just in a cool location. So I remember a couple of years ago, I was invited to speak at something that happened to be hosted at a Great Wolf Lodge, one of those huge indoor water parks. And so I said, tell you what, I'm willing to do this for like a slight reduction, but can I bring my family and you guys pay for a couple extra days? And they said, sure. So dad goes and works, and then my wife and our girls go to the water park for a few days. So we get a vacation out of it, right? So there's a lot of reasons that may make sense. But again, you've got to kind of run it through your own filter of when it makes sense and when it doesn't make sense. And you think about like just the laws of supply and demand. Most speakers tend to be busier sometimes of the year and slower sometimes of the year. So if like, okay, I'm going to be slammed in the spring or in the fall, then it may not make sense to do as many free things then, because those are times where you may have to turn down a paid opportunity because you already took a free opportunity. Whereas other times where it may be a little bit slower and there's fewer things going on, it may make sense for you to go do some type of free thing. So again, are free things bad? No, but just make sure that you're really, really clear on why you're doing it. What's the value that you hope to get out of it? That was something I remember early on in my speaking career. I had a friend tell me that that as a speaker, you're providing something of value, and so you need to receive something of value in exchange. And ideally, that comes in the form of a check and some form of like currency compensation. But that's not always the case. There's a lot of ways to get value in exchange that may not necessarily show up on a paycheck.
So why do you think there are so many events and event planners that maybe don't value the speaker enough? I'm thinking about, a lot of events that have a call to speakers and it says on there, we do not pay speakers. And every time I see that, I think to myself, man, what if I could just say, I don't pay plumbers, like come and do the work, but I'm not going to pay you. Yeah. It suggests to me that maybe there is some mix up in value or misunderstanding of value. We've all been to events where you have speakers. I was just at one recently where one of the earlier speakers had an eye chart up on the screen, right? They had 500 words on one slide, and and it's like, oh man, you're making us look bad here. On the other hand, I felt like, no, actually, in comparison, you're making me look even better. Yeah. So we know as audience members that a great speaker can make an event and a terrible speaker can ruin an event. Yeah. But talk to me about that dynamic of why it doesn't seem like what we do always has perceived value, even though we know it does.
Yeah, there's you're exactly right that absolutely does happen sometimes. And some of it depends on, is this an event planner that's put something on, or is this a brand new thing? So, the speaking fees for speakers, and especially good speakers, it can be a bit of a sticker shock if it's something that you've never booked a speaker before. And so, when you have the chance to pay, potentially several $1,000s for a speaker, or you can have, someone from the, local fire department come talk to your audience. It's just kind of like, yeah, I don't know here, especially again, if you've never experienced it. I know I've had that happen a couple times where maybe I lost out a gig because they're, trying to save a couple bucks, and then they come back later and they're like, oh, okay, now I understand why you're a professional and this person wasn't, So there's that. There's also like, there's going to be some industries where you think about just, again, the kind of the laws of supply and demand. Maybe there's just way more of a demand in terms of like great speakers who don't necessarily need to be paid for it, right? So when we go back to what we just talked about in terms of where it might make sense to speak at something for free, I mean, if you're in an industry where there's a ton of great speakers who want to speak at that particular event or those types of events because there's just so much more value that they can get out of it, regardless of whether or not they're paid, then maybe they, a certain type of event or certain type of industry just kind of has the pick of the litter of going like, we don't have to pay a speaker. We can get a great speaker for free. And again, that's not always the case, but in certain situations where, again, kind of laws of supply and demand, that's absolutely the case. And so it just kind of depends on the industry. It kind of depends on the event planner and what it is that they're looking for.
I got it. I'm going to still go with the old phrase, though, you get what you pay for.
Totally.
So beware of that. Free is not always good.
Well, and to speak to that, like, I think there's also kind of this a challenge or kind of a hurdle for event planners to overcome. Again, if they're not used to hiring speakers, that again, you have the sticker shock of speakers that some speakers can charge, thousands and thousands of dollars. And it's like, I don't understand, like how in the world, why would we pay for someone to who's going to stand on stage and speak for an hour? Like, you start kind of like, people start doing the math of, $10,000 for 1 hour on stage. That doesn't make sense, but the reality is like, you're not paying for that 1 hour. You're paying for the hundreds and thousands of hours previously where either you've worked on your craft or you've delivered other presentations and you figured out what works and what doesn't. So by the time that you show up and you get on their stage and present, like you've really got a polished, dialed in presentation and talk. And so again, some of it is also just kind of the like a mindset shift for speakers, because admittedly, it does feel crazy to charge thousands and thousands of dollars to speak. Like I can't even believe this thing that I find fun and enjoyable, that someone would pay thousands of dollars. I'm not worthy of that, or I shouldn't charge that. That's crazy. So I need to therefore, drastically lower my rate. No, you're providing something of significant and meaningful value. And so there's nothing wrong with you receiving value and being compensated for that.
Yeah, and I think that's actually useful for other industries as well, as identifying what your value really is. In the case of speakers, we're not necessarily selling an hour of our time, right? That's not what is for sale. What is for sale is the value, the impact, the inspiration that we provide to an audience that they take home and use in their lives or at work or what have you, that lasts well beyond the event. Yeah. And so, yeah, it's a little bit more amorphous, but you definitely don't want to be talking about it in time increments, because you're right. The fanciest lawyers in the world make less per hour than a good keynote speaker. So totally makes sense. Let's shift to the experience from an attendee's point of view. I started mentioning before, I've been to events. Man, I remember one event where they decided to go cheap on the MC, and they put one of their executives up on stage. And I'm telling you, 8 o'clock in the morning, everybody's there. Day one, everybody's so excited, and the MC gets up there, and it's like, welcome to our conference. We are so happy to have you here. And you just, you just felt the air, boom, go on from the room. And so, this stuff matters. But as a speaker, how do you think about the experience that you're creating for the audience members?
Yeah, one thing that you can do is to do your best to make a big room or big audience feel small. What I mean by that is a lot of times before I would speak, I'd go out to the audience and I'd go around and I'd shake hands or give high fives or fist bumps or something, because it starts to build some personal connection, right? And so I think something like that you can do definitely makes a big difference. I think the room setup is really, really important. And this is something that sometimes speakers don't have a ton of influence on, but anything that you can help with an event planner, like as they're kind of thinking through the setup, you actually want a room that is too small. Like you think about, I'll give you an example. I remember several years ago speaking at an event in New Jersey, and there was the room that I spoke in was was set up for about 2,000 seats, 2,000 people. And so I did a keynote in there for about 2,000 people. It goes really, really well. Well, right afterwards, I was doing a small workshop breakout for about 50 people. Well, they wanted me to do it in the same room. And so when you have 2,000 people in a room that seats 2,000, it's great. When you have 50 people in a room that seats 2,000, it's empty, it's dead, it feels horrible, right? And so you want a room that feels too small. And so in that type of situation, trying to just have 50 people spread out over 2,000 seats just doesn't work. You need to make the room feel as small as possible. So getting everybody up close, or moving to somewhere else, or rearranging chairs or whatever, to create more of an intimate type of experience. And so that's something that's really important. And I'd say even after you get off stage, anything that you can do to interact with the audience, to talk with them, to be available. People are oftentimes going to want to ask you questions, or share a story with you, or something that they learned, or take a picture with you, or get an autograph, or whatever it may be. And so just being accessible, being available, and just showing like, hey, that person that I was on stage, I'm the same person off stage. And so that's really, it's important to me that I want to make sure, like, if people listen to the podcast or watch this interview, or see me speak or meet me in person, that they're like, he's the same dude anywhere, in any of those type of contexts. It's not like it's some dramatically different version of me. So I think just being approachable, being relatable, being genuine off stage is also just as important.
Yeah, the human element for sure. And funny thing, Grant, I referenced this right when we got on, but this literally happened to me last week. I delivered a keynote. I knew it went well. You know, as a speaker, whether you nail it or not. And this was a good one. I felt really good about it. I got a lot of comments and compliments from the audience. And then some guy comes up to me, and he's a bald guy with a goatee. And he said, "I just want to let you know I've gotten a lot of compliments about your speech."
Oh, that's good.
So I thought that was hilarious. But yeah, a couple more that I would add just really quickly. I think anytime you can go into the audience and engage one-on-one with an audience member, it's great. I referenced slides earlier on. If you're going to use slides, my intention is always that the slide is really background. It's most of my slides are just a picture. And the idea is I want the audience's eyes on me, not on my slides, because I know that I can create something for them. Whereas if you're sitting there squinting and trying to read a slide, that's not great. Or even if people feel the need to have to take pictures of slides, because it sort of means that they're not getting it through their ears, right? Or they feel like they've got to memorize it or something. So I try to stay away from that. All right, we have a question for you from the audience, but I'm going to get to that in just a second. I want to just share my screen for a second and remind people that we are talking to Grant Baldwin. He is the author of The Successful Speaker: 5 Steps for Booking Gigs, Getting Paid, and Building Your Platform. It is available here on Amazon. However, because it's such a popular book, there are only 11 left in stock. So get it today. Go get that book. You can see all the terrific ratings, 4.7, 84%, 5 stars. That is outstanding. I want to say, Grant, real quick, because I had the same experience. I feel like I finally made it when my book had at least 1 rating with every star level. So it looks like you've done that too, which is outstanding. That means you've made it. People, believe it or not, there's lots of research that says that all 5-star ratings are not as believable. So love it. All right, Milan has a question, 2 questions actually. He said he speaks 20 to 25 times per year, and up until now it's been free and/or reduced free or entrance for his company or colleagues. How does he begin charging, and how does he determine the fee? I know that's $1 million question, literally, Grant, but let's hear your answer.
Yeah, I think one thing that's important to think through, Milan, and we touched on this a little bit earlier, but get really, really clear on like what your goals are from speaking. So for example, there's a client that we worked with a while back, and their primary business was doing coaching. And so I think specifically life coaching. And so what they would do though, is they would go speak at 30, 40 events a year, and they would speak at all of these events for free, but it was lead generation for their coaching business. And so their coaching business was generating hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, but the whole thing was built upon speaking for free. So on the surface, on paper, you're just kind of like, oh, you do all these gigs for free. What's the point of that? But the whole business was built on speaking for free at the right type of event. So one is it's important for you to get clear on what's the goal for you with speaking. Is it lead gen, or are you wanting to do more of, I go speak, I collect a check, and that's kind of the end of the transaction, which is fine. So be clear on what that looks like for you. Now, as far as how do you determine what to charge, you're right. Like it's much more of an art than a science. science, and there's a few variables and factors. So let me give you kind of a longer answer, and then I'll give you a shortcut answer. One factor is going to be your industry. You can charge more in some industries versus others. You can charge more speaking to corporations versus nonprofits. You can charge more speaking to colleges versus elementary schools. Again, not one better or worse than the other, but different industries are going to have kind of different fee ranges that they are used to. Another factor is going to be your experience, meaning if you're a brand new speaker just getting started, you're probably not as good as a speaker who's been at it for 10, 20 years and probably just frankly a better speaker than you. Another factor is going to be your marketing materials. So whether we like it or not, people judge books by their covers. And so whenever an event planner is considering you, they're probably considering you plus 2, 3, 4 other speakers. There you go. And so they're looking at a couple different websites. They're looking at a couple different demo videos. And so it doesn't mean that you need to have spent thousands and thousands of dollars on your marketing materials, but you need to make sure that your stuff looks sharp, that it looks professional. Otherwise, people won't take you seriously. So again, a lot of variables and factors that go into it. The shortcut answer, though, is we put together a free speaking fee calculator that you can check out over at myspeakerfee.com. Myspeakerfee.com. It's totally free. You answer a couple questions there, multiple choice questions. It'll spit out a number to you at the bottom there. Again, myspeakerfee.com. And it's just kind of a shortcut thing. You can play with the different variables. When you think about in-person versus virtual, that's in there as well. And that's going to change how you might charge. So again, play around with the speaking fee calculator, totally free, myspeakerfee.com.
Awesome. Love that answer. I would only add to that I think a lot of speakers, at least in my experience, undervalue themselves. They're afraid to charge more. And sometimes you have to test and learn to do that. I was working with a friend of mine recently who's a speaker, and I suggested to her, the next time you sell a speech, give this price instead of this price, because I think you're worth it. You just don't think you're worth it. And if you can do that with confidence, and you know what she did? Booked it at that higher price. And so I think oftentimes we get stuck at you have to start somewhere, and you have to start at those lower levels if you're new to speaking. But then, also progressively over time, as you gain that experience, you see what the market bears. And I think the flip side is true too, is I've seen people that raise too fast, and then they see that the market doesn't bear that higher fee. And so maybe they have to come back down a little bit. But I think you're right that it's an art, not a science. If it was a science, we would just look it all up on the internet and say, okay, this is what I should charge. My speaker fee might be helping to do that. Thank you, Milan. I knew I recognized your name, Milan. He saw me last week in Phoenix. Thank you so much for being there. That's awesome. And he said, makes sense, Grant. Speaking for me is the best lead gen for our org. Thank you. Purchasing your book now. Fantastic. Oh, see, he's got both of ours on his shelf. So Perfect. Good man. Thank you. Grant, we are out of time. I can't believe how fast these conversations go. Tell us where we can connect with you.
Yeah, everything we do is over at thespeakerlab.com, thespeakerlab.com. If you listen to podcasts and shows like this one, you probably listen to other ones. So we have a podcast by the same name, the Speaker Lab Podcast. We have nearly 400 episodes there of lots of free content, anything and everything you can think of related to speaking and the speaking industry, finding and booking gigs, knowing how much to charge, all of that you can find at the Speaker Lab Podcast. Also, you mentioned the book, The Successful Speaker, so definitely check that out. You can get it in hardcover or ebook, Kindle, or Audible audiobook. So definitely check out The Successful Speaker.
And hey, if you're going to check it out, you might as well go through Dan's Amazon shop, right? And see that book and many others that I highly recommend, personally recommend. These are books that I've read, not just books that I've heard are good, but that I've read and personally recommend, and I'm willing to put my name behind. So definitely check out Grant's book. Man, thank you so much. I feel like we could talk for hours more. I definitely have some catching up to do on your podcast, which I'm going to do because I've listened to some episodes and it's incredibly valuable. So I got some long flights coming up. I'll download some episodes and start catching up. But thanks for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Perfect. Thanks, Dan. I appreciate you letting me be here.
All right, that was Grant Baldwin. He is the CEO of the Speaker Lab and author of The Successful Speaker. I want to introduce you quickly to next week's guest. And again, next week we'll be back on our regular schedule. So we'll be back on Thursday. So we're going to have to go a whole 10 days without seeing me here. But Abraham Venismak, live from Israel, is going to be here on May 19th. He's a voiceover speaker, a voiceover actor, which is fascinating. He also, although this seems to be unrelated, it's related. He also runs two of the largest customer service communities on LinkedIn. And so hundreds of thousands of people. So fascinating guy. Looking forward to talking with him next week. Again, our sponsors for the show are Zoho Desk. Please check them out at zoho.com/desk. Tell them that the Experience Maker sent you. If you need help to improve your agent productivity, customer happiness, brand loyalty, they are there for you. Over 50,000 businesses around the world trust Zoho Desk. So should you. Go to zoho.com/desk and tell them the Experience Maker sent you. Hey, thanks so much for being here today. I really, really appreciate it. We will see you next week, 10 days from now on the 19th, noon Eastern. Take care, everyone.